January 12, 1944, 15,000 feet above the Mediterranean Sea. The 332nd Fighter Group, America's only all-black fighter unit, engaged Italian fighters in what would become a turning point in their controversial existence. Across the sprawling combat, American pilots executed maneuvers that left their enemies stunned. For months, these same enemy pilots had dismissed them as inferior airmen, incapable of real combat. But on this January day, everything changed. Italian pilots attempted their standard evasive tactics, braking sharply and diving toward cloud cover. Tactics that had served them well against other American units. But the distinctive red-tailed P-51 Mustangs stayed locked on target, flying with a precision that contradicted everything Axis propaganda had claimed about black pilots. At altitudes where split-second decisions determine survival, the Tuskegee Airmen opened fire. Black smoke trailed from stricken enemy aircraft as pilots bailed out. By mission's end, the 332nd Fighter Group claimed 8 enemy aircraft destroyed without losing a single Mustang. The transformation was undeniable. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. A training program initially designed to fail had produced combat pilots whose skill and discipline were reshaping the air war over Europe. The story of this transformation began in the prejudiced halls of the War Department and the dusty airfield of Tuskegee, Alabama during the bitter segregation of 1941. While American military leaders debated whether black men possessed the intelligence and courage for aerial combat, a group of determined young men prepared to prove history wrong in the most dramatic fashion possible. The United States Army Air Forces had never trained a black pilot before 1941. Military aviation remained exclusively white, defended by myths of racial inferiority that claimed black Americans lacked the reflexes, spatial awareness, and technical aptitude necessary for flight. Even as America prepared for global war, military planners resisted integrating air combat units, arguing it would damage morale and combat effectiveness. These racist beliefs were reinforced by influential Army Air Forces studies. The most damaging, prepared by the School of Aviation Medicine, concluded that the Negro type possessed inherently inferior flying characteristics due to supposedly inferior reaction times and coordination. This pseudoscientific racism provided intellectual cover for military leaders opposed to black aviators. But pressures mounted from multiple directions. The black press, particularly the influential Chicago Defender and Pittsburgh Courier, campaigned relentlessly for equal opportunity in military aviation. Civil rights organizations filed lawsuits challenging military segregation. Most importantly, Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady, publicly supported black aviation by visiting Tuskegee Institute and taking a well-publicized flight with black instructor Charles Chief Anderson. The political pressure forced a reluctant War Department to announce formation of the 99th Pursuit Squadron in January 1941, the first black flying unit in American history. The experiment would begin at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, a historically black college with an existing civilian pilot training program. Critics called it the Tuskegee experiment, expecting, perhaps hoping, it would fail. July 1941, Tuskegee Army Airfield, Alabama. Benjamin O. Davis Jr. reviewed the first class of cadets with growing concern. The son of America's first black general, Davis had graduated from West Point without a single classmate speaking to him outside of official duties, enduring 4 years of silencing due to his race. Now he would command men facing similar barriers, but with the added challenge of learning complex aviation skills in a program designed with impossibly high standards. The performance requirements for Tuskegee cadets exceeded those at white training facilities. Washout rates approached 60% during primary training, nearly double the rate at other fields. Every failure seemed to confirm the military's low expectations. Every success was dismissed as an anomaly. The white instructors initially assigned to Tuskegee approached their duties with skepticism that often bordered on sabotage. Lieutenant Colonel Noel Parrish, who would later command Tuskegee Army Airfield, observed these dynamics with mounting frustration. Though white himself, Parrish recognized the caliber of men in the program and the unfair obstacles placed in their path. In private reports to Washington, he documented the artificial barriers and recommended standardizing requirements across all training facilities regardless of race. His reports vanished into bureaucratic filing cabinets, producing no immediate change. Despite these challenges, the first class persevered through primary, basic, and advanced training. On March 7, 1942, 5 men earned their wings as America's first black military pilots: Benjamin O. Davis Jr., Charles Debo, Mac Ross, George Roberts, and Lemuel Custis. Their graduation received minimal publicity outside the black press. The Army relegated the event to a minor news release, suggesting these 5 graduates represented the limits of black achievement in aviation. What military leaders failed to understand was that these first graduates represented not an endpoint but a beginning. They immediately became instructors for subsequent classes, gradually replacing white instructors who often approached their duties with reluctance or hostility. As black instructors took over more training responsibilities, cadet success rates improved dramatically. April 1943, Tuskegee Army Airfield was transformed. What began as a dilapidated facility with substandard equipment had expanded into a proper military airbase with modern training aircraft and experienced instructors. The instructor corps now included dozens of black pilots, many of whom had graduated with academic and flight records that would have earned immediate combat assignments had they been white. Instead, they remained at Tuskegee, training new pilots while their peers fought overseas. This frustrating delay had an unexpected benefit. It created a corps of exceptionally skilled black aviators with thousands of flight hours in training aircraft. When combat assignment finally came, Tuskegee pilots would enter battle with more training hours than many of their white counterparts. The 99th Fighter Squadron, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Davis, deployed to North Africa in April 1943, joining the 33rd Fighter Group. Their reception proved hostile from the outset. Colonel William Ohlmeyer, commanding the 33rd, segregated the black squadron from his white units and assigned them outdated patrol sectors where enemy contact was unlikely. When the 99th finally engaged enemy aircraft, Ohlmeyer's after-action reports characterized their performance as inferior and recommended removing them from combat operations entirely. Davis was recalled to Washington to defend his men before a skeptical Army Air Forces board. Using detailed combat reports and gun camera footage, he systematically refuted each criticism, demonstrating that his squadron had performed according to doctrine under difficult circumstances. His passionate defense, coupled with support from a few fair-minded senior officers who had observed the 99th firsthand, prevented the squadron's recall. Meanwhile, 3 additional black fighter squadrons completed training at Tuskegee, the 100th, 301st, and 302nd. These units, along with the battle-tested 99th, were organized into the 332nd Fighter Group under Davis's command. The group deployed to Italy in January 1944, where they would finally have opportunity to demonstrate their true capabilities as escort fighters protecting bomber formations. Their initial assignments reflected continuing skepticism about black combat effectiveness. The 332nd received worn aircraft, often P-40 Warhawks that white squadrons had discarded for newer P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs. Their patrol areas remained in less contested airspace, limiting engagement opportunities. Despite these disadvantages, the group performed professionally, gradually building a combat record that forced reluctant acknowledgement of their competence. The transformation began when Colonel Davis instituted unique training regimens focused on their primary mission, bomber escort. While other fighter groups emphasized individual pilot victories, Davis demanded absolute discipline in formation flying and bomber protection. He established a simple principle: no bomber under their protection would be lost to enemy fighters. Pilots who abandoned bombers to chase personal glory faced his formidable displeasure, regardless of whether they scored victories. February 1944 marked a significant breakthrough. The 332nd Fighter Group received their first P-51 Mustangs, the most advanced American fighter available. These aircraft featured distinctive red painted tails that would give the group their famous nickname, Red Tails. The transition to Mustangs eliminated the performance gap with enemy aircraft, allowing Tuskegee Airmen to demonstrate their true capabilities. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Japanese intelligence forces took particular interest in the appearance of an all-black fighter unit. Imperial Japan had built significant propaganda around racial themes, positioning themselves as liberators of non-white peoples from white colonial powers. The existence of black American fighter pilots contradicted their narrative that the United States treated non-white citizens as inferiors incapable of sophisticated military roles. Japanese propaganda broadcasts quickly targeted the Tuskegee Airmen directly. Tokyo Rose, the infamous English-language broadcaster, singled out the 332nd in special messages, "Negro pilots, why do you fight for a nation that lynches your brothers at home? America keeps you segregated, denies you basic rights, yet expects you to die for white freedom." These broadcasts, carefully monitored by Army intelligence, revealed Japanese psychological warfare strategy. If black pilots could be demoralized or induced to perform poorly, it would validate racial propaganda across the Pacific theater. The Japanese psychological operations extended beyond radio broadcasts. Intelligence reports captured after the war revealed specific directives to Axis fighter pilots, when encountering black American pilots, employ aggressive tactics assuming inferior opposition. Japanese military attaches in Germany shared assessments claiming black pilots lacked the reflexes for high-speed combat maneuvers and would break formation under pressure. Italian fighter groups received similar guidance from their Japanese allies, creating a theater-wide expectation that black pilots represented easy victories. Colonel Davis learned of these enemy assessments through intelligence briefings. Rather than concealing this information from his men, he shared it during mission planning, turning enemy racism into a tactical advantage. "They expect us to break under pressure," he told his pilots. "Their prejudice makes them predictable. They'll attack aggressively, expecting us to scatter. We'll maintain discipline, protect our bombers, and demonstrate exactly how wrong they are." This psychological insight proved invaluable during a crucial mission on June 9, 1944. The 332nd escorted B-17 bombers targeting oil refineries near Munich, Germany. As predicted, enemy fighters attacked with unusual aggression, clearly targeting the red-tailed Mustangs with special attention. Japanese military observers were reportedly present among German air units that day, assessing black combat performance to refine propaganda efforts. What they witnessed defied their expectations completely. The 332nd maintained perfect formation discipline. When enemy fighters pressed attacks, Tuskegee pilots executed textbook defensive maneuvers while never abandoning their bomber charges. Captain Joseph Ellsbury shot down 3 German fighters in that single mission. Lieutenant Clarence Lester destroyed 2 more. Most importantly, not a single bomber under their protection was lost. The mission reports from June 9 traveled quickly through enemy intelligence channels. Japanese military attaches sent urgent updates to Tokyo, warning that propaganda assessments of black American pilots were dangerously inaccurate. Intercepted communications revealed growing concern among Axis powers that they had fundamentally misjudged the capabilities of these segregated American units. Rather than adjusting their tactics, Japanese psychological operations doubled down on their strategy. Tokyo Rose broadcasts became more pointed, specifically naming Tuskegee pilots and referencing racial incidents in their hometowns. These personalized messages revealed sophisticated intelligence gathering, but ultimately backfired. Hearing their names on enemy broadcasts became a point of pride among red-tail pilots, concrete evidence they were hurting the enemy badly enough to warrant special attention. By July 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group had established a reputation for bomber protection unmatched by any other escort unit. While some white fighter groups recorded higher numbers of enemy aircraft destroyed, none could match the Red Tail's perfect record of bomber protection. Their discipline and tactical excellence drew grudging admiration from military leaders who had initially doubted their capabilities. This excellence became undeniable during a mission on July 18, 1944. Escorting bombers to targets near Memmingen, Germany, the 332nd encountered over 30 German fighters specifically tasked with breaking through to the bomber formation. Colonel Davis immediately recognized the unusual concentration of enemy aircraft as a deliberate test of his unit's capabilities. What followed was a textbook demonstration of disciplined air combat. Red Tail pilots maintained escort positions, engaging enemy fighters only when they directly threatened bombers. Captain Lee Archer, who had finished the war with 4 confirmed victories, shot down 2 Mi-109s in rapid succession. Lieutenant Wendell Pruitt destroyed another attacking fighter with a remarkable deflection shot at extreme range. Throughout the 40-minute engagement, not a single bomber was lost despite the concentrated enemy effort. The mission success had significant ramifications beyond tactical victory. German pilots landing after the Memmingen mission reported disturbing developments. Black American pilots were fighting with unexpected skill and discipline. Multiple pilots insisted they must have encountered an elite American unit designated by red tail markings. When shown intelligence photographs confirming these were indeed the segregated 332nd Fighter Group, confusion deepened throughout Axis forces. German technical intelligence needed to understand what made these previously dismissed pilots suddenly so effective. The first clue came from wreckage analysis of P-51 Mustangs. Engineers examining downed aircraft noted no technical modifications or special equipment. The Red Tails flew standard P-51s without mechanical advantages. This realization proved even more disturbing to Axis commanders. The Red Tails' effectiveness stemmed entirely from pilot skill and tactical discipline. This conclusion traveled through intelligence channels to Japanese military headquarters. Imperial Japanese Navy air strategists, who had built training doctrines around assumptions of American pilot inferiority, found themselves reconsidering fundamental beliefs. If America's supposedly least capable pilots performed at this level, what did that reveal about overall American air combat potential? Throughout August 1944, more bomber groups specifically requested red tail escorts. This preference, initially expressed privately among bomber crews, eventually reached the attention of General Nathan Twining, commanding the 15th Air Force. Twining, examining mission data with his intelligence staff, discovered the statistic that would define the 332ND's legacy: bomber losses under red tail protection were significantly lower than those escorted by any other fighter group. This revelation triggered a comprehensive review of escort tactics across all fighter groups. What emerged was a portrait of disciplined professionalism that contradicted every racist assumption about black combat performance. While some fighter groups prioritized personal victories, allowing their pilots to chase enemy aircraft beyond visual range of bomber formations, the 332nd maintained strict tactical discipline. Red Tail pilots remained with their bomber charges regardless of tempting opportunities for individual glory. Colonel Davis's leadership philosophy became increasingly influential throughout the Mediterranean theater. His insistence that mission success outweighed personal achievement represented a fundamental shift in fighter doctrine. By September 1944, other fighter group commanders were implementing similar policies, explicitly referencing the 332ND's approach as their model. The unit's growing reputation reached Japanese intelligence analysts monitoring European air combat. Reports compiled by Japanese military attaches in Berlin noted with alarm the effectiveness of America's black fighter pilots. These reports contradicted years of propaganda claiming that non-white soldiers lacked the discipline and intelligence for modern warfare. If America's segregated units performed this effectively despite institutional racism, what did that suggest about Japan's prospects against fully supported American forces? September 12, 1944. The 332nd was assigned to escort B-17s targeting the Blechhammer oil refineries in Poland. This mission would take them deeper into enemy territory than any previous operation, testing both their aircraft range and tactical discipline. Intelligence briefings warned of concentrated enemy fighter presence around the target, including elite German units specifically tasked with breaking bomber formations. The mission briefing revealed another significant detail: Japanese military observers were reportedly flying with German fighter units that day. Imperial Japan had sent experienced pilots to study European air combat firsthand, particularly focusing on German tactics against American bomber formations. These observers would witness the Red Tails in action, providing first-hand assessments to Tokyo about Black American combat capabilities. Captain Edward Gleed, operations officer for the 332nd, incorporated this intelligence into his mission planning. "They're coming to observe us," he told the assembled pilots. "Let's give them something worth reporting." The statement drew knowing laughter from pilots accustomed to fighting under observation, their every action scrutinized for signs of racial weakness that never materialized. The mission proceeded initially as planned. Red Tails rendezvoused with bomber formations over the Adriatic Sea, taking up escort positions with practiced precision. As they crossed into enemy territory, the first German interceptors appeared, probing the formation's defenses. Lieutenant Charles McGee, flying on the formation's eastern flank, spotted them first, a dozen Me-109s climbing to attack altitude. What followed demonstrated the 332nd's tactical evolution. Rather than waiting for the German fighters to initiate combat, McGee led his section in a preemptive attack, climbing above the approaching interceptors then diving through their formation. This aggressive defense scattered the German fighters before they could organize their attack on the bombers. McGee shot down the lead German fighter with a precise burst at close range, while his wingman, Lieutenant Henry Peoples, damaged two more. The engagement continued for nearly 30 minutes as successive waves of German fighters attempted to break through to the bomber formation. Throughout the running battle, Red Tail pilots maintained tactical discipline, engaging enemy aircraft only when they threatened the bombers directly. By mission's end, the 332nd had destroyed 7 German fighters without losing a single bomber, another perfect escort mission. When the formation returned to base, intelligence officers debriefed the pilots with unusual thoroughness. The presence of Japanese observers among German units made this mission particularly significant for counterpropaganda efforts. Each pilot's account was carefully documented, creating a comprehensive record of the engagement that would be shared throughout Allied intelligence networks and, inevitably, would find its way to Japanese analysts. The impact became evident through signals intelligence. Intercepted communications between Berlin and Tokyo revealed Japanese observers had reported the engagement in detail, specifically noting the tactical discipline and combat effectiveness of the Black American pilots. The observers' assessment contradicted years of racial propaganda, acknowledging that the 332nd performed with precision and aggression equal to any fighter unit in Europe. This intelligence reached General Tojo Hideki's staff in Tokyo, creating consternation among military planners who had built psychological warfare strategies around assumptions of racial hierarchy. If America's segregated units fought this effectively, their broader propaganda themes required urgent reconsideration. The revelation came at a particularly dangerous moment for Japan, as American forces advanced across the Pacific, demonstrating increasing coordination between diverse military units. Throughout fall 1944, the 332nd continued accumulating an impressive combat record. Their perfect bomber protection statistic remained intact despite increasingly difficult missions. German fighter pilots, initially dismissive of Black opposition, now approached Red Tail formations with caution, recognizing the discipline and skill of their adversaries. This transformation in enemy perception revealed itself during interrogations of captured German pilots. Lieutenant Walter Schuck, a Luftwaffe ace with 32 victories who was shot down and captured in October 1944, expressed surprise upon learning he had been defeated by a Black pilot. "We were told they were inferior aviators," he told his interrogators. "Whoever shot me down was anything but inferior. His gunnery was excellent, his flying aggressive yet controlled." Similar statements appeared in other interrogation reports, gradually revealing the extent to which Axis forces had misjudged the Tuskegee Airmen. German intelligence assessments, initially influenced by American racial prejudices, underwent significant revision by late 1944. The distinctive red tails became recognized as markers of elite American units to be approached with caution rather than targets of opportunity. Japanese intelligence continued monitoring these developments with growing concern. Their propaganda efforts in the Pacific theater had emphasized racial themes, particularly when addressing Filipino and Pacific Islander populations under Japanese occupation. The demonstrated excellence of Black American combat units undermined these narratives, providing clear evidence that America's racial problems did not prevent non-white service members from achieving battlefield success. November 16, 1944 provided dramatic confirmation of the 332 ND's evolution into an elite combat unit. Escorting bombers to targets in Vienna, they encountered heavy opposition from both flak and fighters. Weather conditions complicated the mission, with cloud cover breaking formation integrity and reducing visibility. Under these challenging conditions, many escort groups might have prioritized survival over mission objectives. Instead, the Red Tails demonstrated remarkable unit cohesion. When cloud formations separated parts of the bomber stream, Captain Luke Weathers organized his squadron to protect isolated bomber elements. Moving between scattered bomber groups, Weathers and his pilots engaged multiple German fighters attempting to exploit the weather-induced confusion. The engagement resulted in 6 confirmed German fighters destroyed with no bomber losses, another perfect escort mission despite the most challenging conditions yet encountered. Weathers' leadership earned him the Distinguished Flying Cross, one of many such awards the 332nd would accumulate despite institutional reluctance to recognize Black achievement. German after-action reports from the Vienna mission revealed growing frustration among Luftwaffe commanders. The report submitted by Major Erich Hartmann, Germany's highest-scoring fighter ace, explicitly identified the 332nd as a formidable opponent demonstrating superior tactical discipline. Hartmann's assessment carried particular weight given his 352 aerial victories and extensive combat experience against American, British, and Soviet fighters. This grudging professional respect from enemy aviators stood in stark contrast to the continued discrimination the Tuskegee Airmen faced within their own military. Despite their combat success, they remained segregated from white units, denied access to officers' clubs, and subjected to racial incidents at bases across Italy. The contradiction between their battlefield acceptance and continued second-class treatment in military society created a painful cognitive dissonance. Colonel Davis addressed this reality directly in a December 1944 letter to his father, General Benjamin O. Davis Sr. "We fight 2 wars daily, one against the Axis, which we are winning, and one against prejudice, which offers more stubborn resistance." The men bear this double burden with remarkable dignity. Their professionalism in the air shames those who question their worth on the ground. This professionalism faced its greatest test during the massive mission to Berlin on March 24, 1945. The 332nd was assigned to escort bombers on the longest mission yet attempted, a round trip exceeding 1,600 miles. The extreme range pushed P-51 Mustangs to their operational limits, requiring precise fuel management and leaving minimal reserves for extended combat. The Berlin mission represented the pinnacle of strategic bombing operations. Germany's capital remained heavily defended despite the war's increasingly desperate trajectory for Axis forces. Intelligence briefings warned of concentrated fighter defenses and the most intensive flak yet encountered. The mission would test every aspect of the 332 ND's training and tactical discipline. Captain Andrew Turner, who would lead one of the 332 ND's squadrons that day, addressed his pilots bluntly during the pre-mission briefing. "Berlin represents everything against which we fight, a regime built on racial hatred and claims of Aryan supremacy. Today we demonstrate the emptiness of those claims by protecting our bombers over Hitler's capital. Let your actions speak where words have failed." The mission proceeded initially as planned. The Red Tails rendezvoused with their bomber charges over the Adriatic, taking up escort positions with practiced precision. As they crossed into German airspace, the first signs of opposition appeared, contrails marking enemy fighter formations assembling at higher altitudes. What followed became the 332 ND's most significant engagement of the war. German fighters, defending their capital with desperate determination, attacked in successive waves. The Luftwaffe had concentrated experienced pilots from multiple units, creating an elite defensive force specifically targeting incoming bomber formations. Despite facing Germany's most skilled remaining pilots, the 332nd maintained perfect tactical discipline. When German fighters pressed their attacks, Red Tail pilots intercepted them with coordinated precision, protecting bomber formations while minimizing their own vulnerability. The engagement continued for nearly 40 minutes as successive waves of German fighters attempted to break through. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown, leading a section of 8 Mustangs, spotted a formation of the new German jet fighters, Me-262s, approaching the bomber stream at high speed. These revolutionary aircraft, flying nearly 100 miles per hour faster than the P-51s, represented a technological advantage that should have been decisive. Conventional tactical doctrine held that propeller fighters should avoid engaging jets directly. Instead of avoiding the threat, Brown led his section directly toward the approaching jets. This aggressive maneuver surprised the German pilots, who had grown accustomed to Allied fighters turning away from their superior speed. Brown anticipated the lead jet's attack run, positioning his Mustang to fire as the faster aircraft overshot his position. His bullets struck the Me-262's engine, sending it spiraling toward the ground trailing smoke. This victory, one of the first American kills against the revolutionary German jets, represented more than an individual achievement. It demonstrated the 332nd's ability to overcome technological disadvantages through superior tactics and aggressive execution. By mission's end, the Red Tails had destroyed 3 Me-262 jets and 9 conventional fighters without losing a single bomber. The Berlin mission's success reached the highest levels of military leadership. General Karl Spaatz, commanding U.S. strategic air forces in Europe, specifically commended the 332nd in his after-action summary, noting their exceptional discipline and aggressive protection of bomber formations. This recognition from the theater's highest air commander represented a dramatic evolution from the skepticism that had greeted the unit's initial deployment. Japanese intelligence analysts monitoring European combat developments noted the Berlin mission with particular attention. Their assessment, captured in documents seized after the war, acknowledged that American colored units have demonstrated combat capability exceeding expectations, particularly in disciplined formation operations. This admission contradicted years of propaganda claiming non-white troops lacked the intelligence and discipline for modern warfare. The 332nd's success forced painful reconsideration of racial assumptions throughout Axis forces. German military leadership, initially dismissive of black opposition, adjusted tactical guidance to acknowledge the Red Tails as elite opponents requiring special consideration. Japanese propagandists, who had built elaborate narratives around white colonial weakness, found those narratives undermined by the demonstrated excellence of America's segregated units. These adjustments came too late to affect the war's outcome. By April 1945, Germany faced imminent defeat, with American bombers striking targets across the Reich with near impunity. The 332nd continued escort operations until the European War's final days, maintaining their perfect record of bomber protection through more than 200 combat missions. The unit's final victory came on April 26, 1945, when Captain William Campbell shot down a German fighter attempting to attack bombers over Linz, Austria. This 112th aerial victory by a Red Tail pilot provided the final statistical validation of their combat excellence. From an experiment expected to fail, the Tuskegee Airmen had evolved into one of the war's most effective fighter units, proving their capabilities beyond any reasonable doubt. The war's conclusion brought complicated emotions for the returning airmen. Despite their battlefield accomplishments, they returned to an America still deeply segregated. Many pilots who had commanded men and machines in combat found themselves denied service at restaurants near the same bases where they had trained. The contradiction between their wartime acceptance and peacetime rejection created profound disillusionment. Yet their achievement had set irreversible changes in motion. Their success had forced institutional reconsideration of racial policies throughout the military. President Harry Truman, influenced partly by the demonstrated excellence of black combat units, signed Executive Order 9981 in 1948, officially desegregating the armed forces. The order specifically cited the combat record of segregated units as evidence that integration would enhance rather than diminish military effectiveness. The 332 ND's legacy extended far beyond American shores. Their success had fundamentally undermined Axis racial propaganda, demonstrating that America's democratic system, despite its flaws, allowed talent to emerge even from communities facing discrimination. This contradiction between American racial practices and American ideals created powerful arguments for civil rights reforms in the post-war period. Perhaps most significantly, their success influenced Japanese post-war reconciliation with democratic principles. Emperor Hirohito's famous Humanity Declaration of January 1, 1946, renouncing claims of divine status and racial superiority, acknowledged that the war had demonstrated the emptiness of racial hierarchies. Allied occupation authorities specifically used examples of successful Black American units to counter lingering Japanese racial ideologies during Reconstruction. The Red Tails story might have faded from popular memory without the persistent efforts of their own historian, Charles Francis. As a young intelligence officer assigned to the 332nd, Francis recognized the historical significance of their achievement. Throughout the war and for decades afterward, he meticulously documented their operations, collecting mission reports, photographs, and personal accounts that would otherwise have disappeared into classified archives. Francis's work preserved crucial details that official histories often overlooked. His documentation revealed the extent to which enemy forces had specifically targeted the 332nd for psychological operations, considering their destruction particularly valuable for propaganda purposes. His research also uncovered the Japanese connection, the specific interest Imperial Japanese intelligence took in America's segregated units and how their success undermined Axis racial narratives across multiple theaters. In 1955, Francis published The Tuskegee Airmen, The Men Who Changed a Nation, the first comprehensive account of the 332 ND's formation and combat operations. The book revealed operational details previously unknown outside military circles, particularly regarding enemy perceptions of the unit. His research confirmed through captured German and Japanese documents how thoroughly enemy forces had misjudged the Tuskegee Airmen and how dramatically that assessment had changed by war's end. The book found limited commercial success initially but gained significant readership among military professionals and civil rights activists. Its detailed account of the 332 ND's evolution from experimental unit to elite fighter group provided powerful arguments against continued segregation in American society. The documented excellence of Black airmen in the most technically demanding military role undermined claims that racial differences affected performance in complex tasks. Perhaps the most profound Japanese connection emerged decades after the war. In 1982, a delegation of Japanese aviation historians visited the Tuskegee Airmen's reunion in Detroit, Michigan. They presented documents from Japanese military archives revealing the extent to which Imperial Japan had monitored the 332nd as a psychological warfare case study. The documents included assessments from Japanese observers who had flown with German units against the Red Tails in 1944. These first-hand accounts described the Black American pilots as displaying precision and tactical discipline comparable to the finest Japanese naval aviators. This grudging professional respect from former enemies provided final validation of their achievement, confirming that their excellence had been recognized even by those most invested in dismissing their capabilities. For the Tuskegee Airmen returning home, victory brought bittersweet realities. They had conquered enemies abroad only to face continued discrimination at home. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., who had led the 332nd through its most significant combat operations, found himself denied service at officers' clubs on American bases, the same bases where white pilots he had outscored at West Point were welcomed without question. This contradiction created a powerful catalyst for change. Major Coleman Young, who had served as a bombardier and navigation instructor at Tuskegee, returned to Detroit determined to transform his community. Young channeled his military experience into political activism, eventually becoming Detroit's first Black mayor in 1974. In that position, he directly cited his Tuskegee service when challenging discriminatory hiring practices in city government. "I've proven my competence under enemy fire," Young told resistant department heads during a contentious 1975 meeting. "I won't accept questions about competence based on race in this administration." His leadership transformed Detroit's municipal workforce, creating opportunities previously denied to black residents despite their qualifications. Similar transformations occurred across America as Tuskegee veterans leveraged their wartime achievements to challenge peacetime barriers. Lieutenant Span Watson, who had shot down 2 German fighters during the war, returned to New York and applied to commercial airlines. When denied consideration despite superior qualifications, Watson filed discrimination complaints with the newly established Fair Employment Practices Commission. His persistence eventually forced American Airlines to interview him, though they still refused to hire black pilots. Watson's documentation of this discrimination provided crucial evidence for later civil rights litigation. His military record, including commendations signed by generals who commanded the European Air War, made it impossible to claim his rejection stemmed from qualification concerns rather than racial bias. The impact extended beyond individual veterans to influence institutional reform. General Daniel Chappie James, who had trained at Tuskegee though he deployed too late for European combat, became the first black 4-star general in American military history. In that position, he systematically eliminated discriminatory practices that had persisted despite official integration. James specifically referenced the 332 ND's combat record when challenging resistance to black officers' advancement into command positions. The red tails demonstrated the emptiness of racial barriers in combat, James stated in a 1975 Pentagon briefing. "We cannot maintain artificial barriers in peacetime if we expect operational excellence in war." His practical approach to integration, focusing on combat effectiveness rather than abstract moral principles, proved particularly effective within military culture. The transformation extended internationally through unexpected channels. In 1952, the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force was established during American occupation. Its training programs were directly modeled on American practices, including case studies of successful American units. Among these case studies, the 332nd Fighter Group received particular attention for their disciplined formation tactics and exceptional mission focus. Lieutenant General Curtis LeMay, who commanded American occupation forces in Japan, specifically included the Red Tail's operational history and materials provided to emerging Japanese defense institutions. This inclusion represented more than technical knowledge transfer, it demonstrated America's capacity for self-correction on racial matters, an important example as Japan rebuilt under democratic principles. Japanese aviation students studied the 332 ND's tactics with particular attention to their perfect bomber protection record. This tactical discipline became foundational to Japanese defense doctrine, which emphasized mission accomplishment over individual achievement. The irony was not lost on American observers. A unit initially dismissed as incapable due to race had become a model for elite forces internationally. Their influence spread through more personal connections as well. In 1956, a Japanese trade delegation visited Chicago, meeting with business leaders including Tuskegee veteran Clarence Lucky Lester. During a formal dinner, delegation leader Takashi Yamamoto approached Lester privately, revealing he had served as an intelligence officer during the war, specifically analyzing reports about the 332nd. "Your unit forced us to reconsider fundamental assumptions," Yamamoto admitted. "We had built propaganda around claims of white weakness and colonial exploitation. Your success demonstrated that America's democratic principles, despite imperfect implementation, allowed talent to emerge regardless of race." This recognition influenced our post-war acceptance of democratic reforms. This conversation, documented in Lester's papers archived at Tuskegee University, reveals the extent to which the 332 ND's achievement transcended military significance. Their excellence had undermined enemy psychological warfare strategies across multiple theaters, demonstrating in practice what American propaganda often claimed in principle, that democratic systems allowed merit to overcome prejudice. Throughout the 1950s, as veterans built civilian careers, they faced continued discrimination despite their service. Dr. Harry Weathers, who had served as a mechanic maintaining the 332 Indies Mustangs, completed medical school after the war. When he attempted to secure hospital privileges in Philadelphia, he was rejected despite excellent qualifications. The rejection letter, preserved in his personal papers, explicitly stated that patients would feel uncomfortable with a colored physician, regardless of qualifications. Weathers responded by establishing his own clinic in North Philadelphia, serving a primarily black community with medical care previously unavailable. By 1960, his practice had expanded to include 3 additional physicians, all veterans of segregated military units. Their combined practice provided crucial medical services while demonstrating professional excellence that contradicted racist assumptions about black medical competence. This pattern repeated across professional fields as Tuskegee veterans transformed obstacles into opportunities. Charles Hall, who had scored the 332 Indies' first aerial victory in 1943, returned to Indiana and applied to engineering positions with major manufacturers. Despite consistent rejection, Hall leveraged GI Bill benefits to establish his own manufacturing company producing precision components for automotive applications. By 1965, Hall Engineering employed over 60 workers, many of them veterans of segregated military units who faced similar discrimination in civilian employment. The company secured contracts with major automotive manufacturers based on exceptional quality control and competitive pricing. When automotive executives expressed surprise at the firm's perfect delivery record, Hall referenced his military experience. "When I flew escort, bombers' lives depended on my performance," he told a Chrysler purchasing manager during a plant inspection. "I bring that same standard to every component we produce. Lives depend on automotive parts just as they depended on my marksmanship." This practical approach, emphasizing performance over abstract principles, proved particularly effective in breaking down resistance to black-owned businesses. Their legacy gained renewed attention during the civil rights movement of the 1960s. As Americans debated integration's merits, the Tuskegee Airmen's wartime achievement provided powerful evidence against claims that racial integration would reduce effectiveness in challenging environments. Their perfect bomber protection record offered statistical validation that excellence transcended racial categories. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. specifically referenced the Tuskegee Airmen in a 1963 address to labor leaders in Chicago. "These men demonstrated excellence under the most demanding conditions imaginable, aerial combat against a determined enemy," King noted. Yet they returned home to find doors closed based on the same prejudice they had proven groundless through their service. Their experience represents the fundamental contradiction we must resolve as a nation. This contradiction received formal acknowledgement in 1965 when President Lyndon Johnson invited Tuskegee veterans to the White House for the signing of that year's Civil Rights Act. Johnson specifically cited their service when challenging congressional opposition to the legislation. "These men defended American principles abroad," Johnson stated during the ceremony. "It is indefensible that they should be denied the benefits of those principles at home." The event represented important symbolic recognition, but meaningful change emerged more from the veterans' continued excellence in civilian life. Their success across professional fields demonstrated that opportunity, rather than innate differences, determined achievement. As they reached positions of influence, they systematically dismantled barriers that had initially impeded their own advancement. Judge Robert Decatur, who had served as a maintenance officer with the 332nd, became the first black federal judge in Ohio. From that position, he adjudicated numerous discrimination cases, applying legal principles informed by his military experience. His judicial opinions frequently referenced objective performance metrics, reflecting the practical approach that had characterized Tuskegee operations. "The law cannot sustain distinctions without factual basis," Decatur wrote in a landmark 1972 employment discrimination case. "When qualified individuals are excluded based on characteristics unrelated to performance, both justice and practical efficiency are undermined." This focus on measurable performance rather than abstract principles proved particularly effective in transforming institutional practices. Their legacy received renewed international attention during diplomatic engagements throughout the Cold War. As the United States sought to counter Soviet influence in Africa and Asia, the Tuskegee Airmen's achievement provided powerful counterarguments to communist propaganda highlighting American racial problems. During a 1974 diplomatic mission to newly independent Kenya, Tuskegee veteran Alexander Jefferson participated in cultural exchange programs specifically addressing Soviet claims about American racism. Jefferson's presentations focused on the 332ND's evolution from experimental unit to elite fighter group, demonstrating America's capacity for institutional reform despite historical prejudices. Our achievement demonstrated that democratic systems, despite imperfections, allow merit to emerge and force institutional change, Jefferson explained to Kenyan military cadets. We proved our capabilities through performance, and that performance eventually transformed the institution that initially doubted us. This practical narrative proved particularly effective in nations evaluating competing Cold War ideological claims. The Soviet Union had invested heavily in propaganda highlighting American racial problems, particularly targeting newly independent African nations. The Tuskegee Airmen story provided American diplomats with a powerful counter-narrative, not denying historical discrimination but demonstrating how democratic systems allowed for correction through demonstrated excellence. This international impact became particularly evident during exchanges with the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force. When American and Japanese pilots conducted joint exercises in 1975, Japanese commanders specifically requested briefings on the 332ND's operational history. The request recognized how thoroughly their tactics had been incorporated into Japanese training doctrine during the post-war period. Colonel Daniel Chappie James, by then a senior Pentagon official, delivered this briefing personally. His presentation emphasized the practical aspects of the 332ND's success, their focus on mission accomplishment over individual glory, their disciplined formation tactics, and their perfect bomber protection record. These operational details transcended cultural differences, establishing professional respect between former adversaries. The briefing, documented in Defense Department archives, highlights how thoroughly the 332nd had transformed from controversial experiment to tactical model. James specifically noted the historical irony: a unit initially expected to fail had become a case study in operational excellence studied by air forces worldwide, including former enemies who had once dismissed them based on racial prejudice. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, as Tuskegee veterans reached retirement age, they faced a new challenge: ensuring their achievement would not be forgotten. Many recognized that official military histories often minimized the accomplishments of segregated units, focusing instead on integration's later success. Without intervention, their unique achievement might disappear from historical memory. This concern led to the formation of Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated in 1972, a veterans organization specifically dedicated to preserving their legacy. Unlike many veterans groups focused primarily on social connections, the Tuskegee Airmen established ambitious educational programs designed to document their physician links back to your decision that day. The acknowledgement carried no melodrama, just honest assessment of causality. Without Goldstein's intervention, Hoffman's future contributions to medicine would never have existed. Lives saved through his post-war practice represented an extension of that single rescue act. The ripple effect continued decades later, touching patients who would never know its origin. Their conversation extended beyond the scheduled time. Professional experiences. Ethical challenges. The evolution of medicine since the war. Throughout, the extraordinary nature of their connection remained unspoken background, former enemies now colleagues united by shared commitment to healing. As they prepared to part, Hoffman reached into his pocket and removed a small object, a lighter made from aircraft aluminum. "This was fashioned from a piece of my Messerschmitt," he explained. A reminder of that day. He handed it to Goldstein. "I think it belongs with you more than me." The gesture represented more than a souvenir. The transformed metal symbolized their own transformation, from enemies defined by national conflict to individuals connected through human recognition. Goldstein accepted the gift with understanding of its significance beyond monetary value. News of these reunions reached Raymond Martinez in California through veterans networks. The construction company owner had maintained sporadic contact with Weber over the years, occasional letters exchanged through international mail. The correspondence represented unusual connection between former combatants, yet neither man found it strange. Their shared experience had established communication channels outside normal post-war boundaries. Martinez contacted conference organizers, learning that Weber was not among the German delegation. Hoffman, however, confirmed Weber's current location and professional status during conversation with Goldstein. This information traveled back to Martinez through informal channels, eventually enabling direct communication with both German veterans. The exchange developed into something unprecedented, plans for a formal reunion of individuals connected through the extraordinary events of March 1945. Not a military gathering. Not diplomatic reconciliation orchestrated by governments. Just personal acknowledgement of shared experience that transcended national divisions. Eleanor Winters, now director of nursing at a major Chicago hospital, received invitation to this gathering through Callahan. The former captain had maintained her principles throughout post-war career, establishing training protocols that emphasized medical ethics above political considerations. Her approach influenced a generation of nursing students trained under her supervision. "I'm not sure what purpose such a reunion would serve," she replied initially. Her focus remained on present challenges rather than past experiences. The war had provided valuable lessons, but she had integrated these into professional practice without dwelling on specific incidents. Callahan's response proved persuasive: "The German pilots want to thank those who saved them. That includes you most of all. Your decisions established the foundation for everything that followed." The observation acknowledged Winters' central role in creating the environment where humanitarian treatment became standard practice rather than exception. James Harrison, the former lieutenant colonel, received his invitation while serving as medical director at Veterans Administration. His administrative role had expanded post-war, focusing on improving care standards for those who had served. The principles established at the 42nd Field Hospital informed his approach to institutional management, balancing procedural requirements against individual needs. "Remarkable that they remember after all this time," he commented to his secretary. The observation contained no dismissal, merely surprise at the persistence of memory across decades. He had commanded hundreds of medical personnel, overseen thousands of cases. That these particular patients recalled specific treatment reflected something beyond routine medical care. The reunion location required careful consideration. Germany remained politically sensitive as Cold War tensions intensified. The United States carried associations with occupation authority for many Germans. Neutral territory seemed appropriate for this unprecedented gathering. Switzerland provided suitable venue, its medical institutions having maintained neutrality throughout the conflict. The University Hospital Zurich hosted the meeting in June 1958. No publicity surrounded the event. No official recognition from governments or military organizations. Just private acknowledgement among individuals whose lives had intersected during history's most destructive conflict. Hoffman arrived first, accompanied by Weber. The former Oberleutnant had established successful maritime insurance practice in Hamburg, his military experience providing useful perspective on risk assessment for commercial shipping. The American titanium pins in his leg had become conversation piece during business meetings, tangible evidence of unexpected connection between former enemies. "I'm not sure why I'm nervous," Weber commented as they waited in the hospital conference room. "These people saved our lives. Why should meeting them again cause anxiety?" The observation highlighted the complex emotions surrounding their status, gratitude mingled with awareness of former enemy identity, appreciation shadowed by memory of the circumstances that had necessitated medical intervention. Goldstein and Callahan arrived together, having traveled from Boston on the same flight. Martinez joined them shortly thereafter, his construction company now successful enough to afford European travel without financial strain. Each carried personal recollection of the events that had brought them together, distinct perspectives on shared experience. When Winters entered with Harrison, the gathering achieved completion. The former captain had changed little physically, still carrying herself with the composed authority that had directed a combat hospital under extraordinary circumstances. Harrison had aged more visibly, administrative responsibilities etching deeper lines around eyes that had witnessed too much suffering during war years. Introductions proceeded awkwardly at first. Military ranks no longer applied, yet civilian titles seemed inadequate for acknowledging their shared history. They settled into conversation gradually, beginning with professional updates before addressing the circumstances that had connected them across enemy lines. "I've often wondered," Weber said during this transition, "why you didn't treat us as enemies. It would have been easier, perhaps even expected." The question contained no accusation, merely genuine curiosity about decisions that had deviated from wartime norms. Harrison deferred to Winters, acknowledging her primacy in achievement and inspire future generations. Their efforts faced significant challenges. Statement: their achievement demonstrated that capability transcends artificial limitations. Similar inspiration appeared in unlikely places. When Japanese astronaut Koichi Wakata completed his first space mission in 1996, he listed the Tuskegee Airmen among his personal heroes in pre-flight interviews. This recognition from a nation that had once dismissed them based on race demonstrated how thoroughly their achievement had transcended its historical context, representing universal principles of excellence under challenging conditions. Their legacy continues through educational programs reaching students who might otherwise never encounter their achievement in standard curricula. The organization's scholarship program has supported over 2,000 aviation students since its establishment, creating opportunities previously unavailable to young people facing contemporary barriers. Among these scholarship recipients, Major Shauna Rochelle Kimbrell became the first black female fighter pilot in Air Force history. During her 2002 commissioning ceremony, Kimbrell specifically thanked Tuskegee veterans in attendance, acknowledging their achievement as foundation for her opportunity. "You proved excellence possible when most expected failure," Kimbrell stated. "You transformed limitations into inspiration through performance rather than complaint." This practical approach, focusing on excellence rather than obstacles, remains their most enduring legacy. Their achievement demonstrated that capability transcends artificial limitations, that performance renders prejudice groundless, and that excellence forces institutional change even in systems initially resistant. Most importantly, they proved that America's democratic principles, despite imperfect implementation, allow merit to emerge and eventually transform the institutions themselves. Their story represents American history at its most complex and meaningful, not a simplistic narrative of triumph or failure, but a nuanced account of flawed institutions gradually transformed through demonstrated excellence. They fought for a nation that initially questioned their capability, proved their worth through performance under the most demanding conditions imaginable, and returned to continue transforming the society that had doubted them. The final measure of their achievement lies not in medals awarded or enemy aircraft destroyed, but in opportunities created for subsequent generations. Their legacy lives in every black pilot who flies without their qualifications being questioned, in every integrated unit that operates without reference to race, and in every American institution that evaluates individuals based on performance rather than prejudice. When the last Tuskegee pilot passes, their achievement will remain, not merely as historical footnote but as practical demonstration that excellence transcends artificial limitations. They proved through performance what philosophers had argued through principle, that human capability recognizes no racial boundaries, that courage and intelligence appear in all communities, and that society's limiting opportunity based on irrelevant characteristics undermine their own potential. This legacy extends beyond military significance to represent fundamental American principles. Their story demonstrates democracy's capacity for self-correction, showing how performance eventually overcomes prejudice when systems allow merit to emerge. In this capacity for transformation through demonstrated excellence lies democracy's greatest strength, not initial perfection but continuous improvement through recognizing capability wherever it appears. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.